Heck yeah. Hope everybody is having a fantastic start of the week, and I hope y'all had a fantastic weekend. There is a lot to discuss this week, more news than usual. Some weeks are relatively slow where we are looking for, upcoming fights and, recapping old fights, but there's little in the way of boxing news. Today's not one of those days. Today there is a good amount of news to discuss, as well as a good amount of fight announcements and recaps, very interesting recaps, and just being able to kind of look forward and forecast what we are to expect for the remainder of 2022. There's a ton that I want to get into. So yeah, once again, I hope everybody is doing well. Ron Sizzle 402 is in the house, giving some thoughts on Shields versus Savannah Marshall, as well as Michaela versus Alicia Baumgartner. This weekend is a very consequential female boxing event, and it's so good that it's coming just on the heels of Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano. A lot of the boxing community felt like they had caught lightning in a bottle with that event, and so being able to pivot from that and then just pretty instantly get right into Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall, where if I was to place a percentage chance at a stoppage in Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano, it would have been a lesser likelihood, in my view, than what we are to expect in Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. So yeah, this is a hugely consequential fight, and it couldn't take place at a better time. In terms of certain fight announcements that I want to go over briefly, there's Leigh Wood versus Mauricio Lara, which I was a little bit surprised about. I thought we were going to get something more like Mauricio Lara versus Leigh Wood versus Leo Santa Cruz. I thought that the WBA was going to look to consolidate those titles, but it looks like they gave their blessing for Leigh Wood to go ahead and defend his WBA belt against Mauricio Lara, who, notably knocked out Josh Warrington, the current IBF champ, now I guess two-time IBF champ, Josh Warrington. So, when Josh Warrington became the person to fight for the IBF title against Kiko Martinez, I thought that it was unfortunate that Mauricio Lara was getting looked over. So in that respect, I'm glad that Lara now has a chance, being that he knocked Josh Warrington out, has a chance to fight for a title. It's just that in this case, it's going to come in the form of the WBA title against a total warrior who, in my view, fought the fight of the year so far in 2022 in Leigh Wood. So I'm really looking forward to Leigh Wood versus Mauricio Lara. Nadia Inoue versus Paul Butler, battle for undisputed in the bantamweight division. That's going to be taking place on December 13th. So that's another one worth looking forward to. Maris Briedis, who just lost his cruiserweight belt against Jai Opataya, is about to return to the ring in October 29th against Justice Huni. And this is actually going to take place in the heavyweight division. So Briedis is actually going to be fighting at heavyweight for his next fight. Maybe the biggest news to break, certainly the biggest news to break today, well, arguable. I mean, we're going to talk some Tyson Fury and the potential of a Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua fight. We're going to get into that, absolutely. But the fight that was announced today, and it was rumored for a few days, but now it's official. Everybody's favorite celebrity fighter, Jake Paul, is going to be fighting, in my view, the second greatest MMA fighter in MMA history, Anderson the Spider Silva. And there's a lot to unpack with that one. Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva is official. We're going to talk a little bit about that one. Caleb Plant versus Anthony Durrell. That's going to take place on the Deontay Wilder versus Robert Helenius undercard. That's a 168-pound fight that I'm looking forward to. They recently had their press conference. Some bad blood between the two. So, interesting fight. Anthony Durrell is in his late 30s at this point. So I wonder how he's going to do over the course of, 12 rounds against a stylist like Caleb Plant. Jarrell Big Baby Miller, for those who still care about Jarrell Big Baby Miller after his several PED failures, he's going to be returning to the ring to take on Lucas Brown. That's going to be on Daniel Dubois' next undercard on November the 13th. Stan Tucker, what's good? AKA Dad is in the house. What's going on? Yeah, thank you for coming through. We basically, I think I could speak for him when I say that I actually need to rewatch. I need to rewatch Andy Ruiz versus Ruiz-Ortiz. I do have opinions about the fight. I thought that it was an interesting matchup, and we will recap that fight in this live chat. But I do think that it's worth a rewatch. And there was some good undercard action as well there. So the last fight that was announced, and this was actually announced more than a week ago, and it was announced a couple of weeks ago, but it was given a location a little more than a week ago. But I wasn't on live last Tuesday, so I wasn't able to get to it. But Dimitri Bivol defending his WBA light heavyweight title against Gilberto Zurdo Ramirez. That's going to take place on November 5th in Abu Dhabi. So, yeah, a lot of fight announcements. But, yeah, we're also, like I said, going to talk a little Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. And some news that broke. Tyson Fury is calling out Anthony Joshua. So the recently retired Tyson Fury came out of retirement and was basically challenging the WBA, IBF, and WBO champion, heavyweight champion, Alexander Usyk, when Usyk was fresh off of his second victory over Anthony Joshua. Karma Serene, Zordo. Absolutely. That's going to be a good one. So he looked like, he being Fury, looked like he was going to come out of retirement and was basically sounded like he was willing to fight for the battle of undisputed at heavyweight against Usyk. But then Usyk, recently said, he just fought, a couple of weeks ago, said it's going to take a few months before he returns to the ring. He's looking at an early 2023 return to the ring, probably February-ish for Usyk. So Fury's now saying, well, you know what? I want to fight now. So, hey, you don't want to fight right now, Usyk? Okay, that's fine. Anthony Joshua, how about you? So it looks like that's the move that the Gypsy King is making. And, there was speculation over, okay, well, what's the business going to look like? How is he going to try to lure Anthony Joshua into this, a title challenge, right? For his Tyson Fury's WBC belt and for the lineal title, right? For those who pay attention to the lineage of the heavyweight belt. So it was recently revealed later today by, I think it was Michael Benson who broke the news that supposedly Tyson Fury is offering Anthony Joshua a 40% purse split. So it's not going to be, they're not proposing 70-30, 80-20, nothing whack like that. It looks like Tyson Fury is going to offer 40% of the purse, which, maybe 3 years ago, that wouldn't have made sense because Anthony Joshua hadn't just lost twice to Usyk, and Joshua was a far greater name than Fury. While you could argue that he's still a greater name than Tyson Fury today, he's coming off of back-to-back losses, and some view it as, Tyson Fury actually extending an olive branch by offering 40% of the purse. So we'll see if Eddie Hearn, who has been saying that the biggest fight that you can make in the sport is Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. So I'm sure Eddie Hearn would be champing at the bit to make this fight official. We'll see how much Anthony Joshua has an appetite for fighting Tyson Fury right now. Because if you remember, before Deontay Wilder, or should I say Tyson Fury versus Wilder 3 was scheduled, they had briefly announced an agreement on Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. But it was non-enforceable because Deontay Wilder still had the leverage to choose to enforce his rematch clause after his loss in the second fight to Fury. So remember, they were about to actually do Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. And then, Tyson Fury basically had to pivot, reverse course, and go back and handle business in a trilogy fight against Deontay Wilder. And then Anthony Joshua basically came out and just tore, just really went at Tyson Fury. He thought that it was disingenuous. He thought that Fury had no plans on actually fighting him. And so rarely do you hear or see Anthony Joshua come out that emotionally. Obviously, this is before his post-fight comments after Usyk versus Joshua 2. But he seemed genuinely upset that Tyson Fury made it seem like Fury Joshua was about to happen, and then went back to have to fight that third fight with Deontay Wilder. And then, Anthony Joshua was then in the unfortunate position in having to fight Alexander Usyk at that point when things fell through between him and Tyson Fury. So, yeah, we'll see how Team Anthony Joshua responds to this, reported offer. It's not an official offer yet. They haven't sent anything physically to Eddie Hearn, but we'll see how serious both sides are on making Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua happen late this year, 2022. I'm obviously hoping that the fight happens. Obviously, I would have loved to have seen, we're still on a course to get Tyson Fury versus Alexander Usyk. It just looks like Fury doesn't want to just sit around and wait for Usyk and wants to fight sooner rather than later. So we'll see how that one plays out. But that's where we stand right now on a potential Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua showdown. So some more news that came out. Josh Taylor, the former undisputed 140-pound champion. What up, TJ? TJ is in the house. What's going on? Thank you for coming through. Josh Taylor, who still hasn't officially lost a fight, just coughed up his third 140-pound title. So remember, he had to give up the WBA belt because he didn't want to sign to fight, I think it was Alberto Puello. And then for the WBC belt, Josh Taylor had to cough that up because he wasn't willing to, at that time, fight Jose Zepeda, who's now about to fight Regis Prograis. And they just had their purse bid. And so a third party called Marv Nation Promotions actually won that purse bid. That is a company run by Marvin Rodriguez. And the offer that he put up was like $2.4 million. So he by far outbid everybody else. We'll see if that one actually goes through or if it falls apart. Because remember, DAZN outbid everybody else for that initially for Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos. And then the fight was postponed and canceled several times. And DAZN ended up losing. Or I'm sorry, Triller had won the purse bid. And Triller ended up losing that fight. And it was a very bad look for Triller when they couldn't deliver on Teofimo Lopez versus George Kambosos. But Marv Nation Promotions won the purse bid for Jose Zepeda versus Regis Prograis. I'm just glad that the fight is about to happen, and I sincerely hope that it does in fact happen. Yeah, TJ. It's a very, very good fight, but I mean, when you've got, Top Rank putting very elite fights on, Shakur Stevenson versus Oscar Valdez was on ESPN. So we've seen PBC kind of abuse the pay-per-view model a bit, most recently with Andy Ruiz versus Ruiz-Ortiz, we'll also get into. But yeah, the idea that Marv Nation Promotions is making Zepeda versus Prograis pay-per-view, that's not great for fight fans. I don't think it's great for the sport. You want to try to broaden the audience, but Marv Nation put up $2.4 million, so they're going to have to make that investment worth it. So I think that's the math that goes into that one. Upheaval 963, what's going on? Salute. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. So yeah, Josh Taylor, as I said, he's been hemorrhaging titles lately. Coughed up the WBA, the WBC, and now the IBF. And now the only title that Josh Taylor holds is the WBO belt. And he is still, they haven't made this fight official yet. So it's like, if you're willing to cough up 3 belts, why isn't Josh Taylor versus Jack Catterall, the remix or the rematch. Why hasn't that officially been announced yet? That's just kind of puzzling. But I'm almost certain that they're going to announce that fight sometime soon. Josh Taylor, I mean, the original fight took place in December. So now both Josh Taylor and Jack Catterall, they've been out of the ring for 9+ months. So yeah, hopefully that one gets announced sooner rather than later. And then that belt that Josh Taylor just coughed up, that's the IBF belt, that's going to be fought for between Jeremias Ponce versus Subriel Matias. Hardcore fight fans have seen them before, both looking impressive. That's going to be an interesting fight for the now vacant IBF 140-pound title. So the other IBF title eliminator, essentially purse bid that happened, which Lou DiBella won with a bid of $975,000, is Josh Buwatsi versus Jean Pascal. That fight's about to take place in the light heavyweight division. We saw Eddie Hearn try to kind of disrupt the Dimitri Bivol versus Zordo Ramirez plans by inserting his guy, Joshua Buwatsi, even though, Matchroom DAZN is still going to be a co-promoter in Bivol versus Zordo. Basically, Eddie Hearn was trying to appeal to the WBA and say, what, instead of Zordo Ramirez being the mandatory, why can't we go forward with a Dimitri Bivol versus Joshua Buwatsi fight? WBA said, it's going to be Dimitri Bivol versus Zordo Ramirez. Stick to the script. So now Joshua Buwatsi is about to fight former title holder Jean Pascal, 2-time champ, I believe. I would have to lean Joshua Buwatsi, although I do think Jean Pascal will be the best fighter that Buwatsi's faced in his career. Jean Pascal just had a pretty interesting win about a month and some change ago over Meng Fanlong. So yeah, Jean Pascal, even as he's, I think, like 40 years old now, he still has a good amount of ability left. So we'll see how Buwatsi versus Pascal plays out. Let's get into the recaps for a moment. Hey, Jesus is in the house. Yo, what's going on? Thank you for coming through. Karma Serene says, I think he's trying to offload Buwatsi's contract ASAP. Oh, really? So you don't think Eddie Hearn plans to keep Joshua Buwatsi on Matchroom for much longer? Is it because Buwatsi at this point, is his contract about to expire and now he's trying to get more money that Hearn is unwilling to pay? Or is there some other reason why he would want to offload Buwatsi essentially to the competition, right? Especially because Eddie Hearn, he usually makes good plays for the UK fighters, right? That's kind of Eddie Hearn's thing. It wasn't until in recent years, aside from Tevin Farmer, was Tevin Farmer technically Matchroom? I believe he was. But, once upon a time, Eddie Hearn's flagship fighter was Kell Brook. Since then, he's had, quite a run where you could argue that he might be the #1 promoter in the game right now. He's certainly the most, upfront and visible promoter. Nobody ever sees Al Heyman, right? And, to his credit, Bob Arum still gets out there, but I think he's past 90. Bob is slowing down, but he still does make himself available. I just saw him on Blue Blood Boxing's YouTube channel. Bob Arum, the legend, did an interview on a very popular YouTube channel. I was pretty impressed by that. Do I like any of the fights on Showtime this Friday? I'm sorry, you're gonna actually, TJ, what's going on? You're gonna have to remind me what those, and shame on me. Let me actually see if I could find that on the calendar. I should have that listed. I try keeping a pretty up-to-date running calendar, and I'll tell you, I am, looking forward to I don't have it, so you're gonna have to let me know in the comments who is fighting this coming Friday. But I'm obviously looking forward to Shields versus Marshall and Michaela Mayer versus Alicia Baumgartner. Oh, Adorno's fighting. Okay, I'm going to look into that. And I might do, if not a full-out preview, maybe just some, some quick thoughts on the Friday action. But thanks for the heads up on that one. And please let me know your thoughts in the comments on the upcoming Adorno fight. Yeah, he had a deep amateur pedigree. I agree. Adorno did. And I mean, we'll see how the career plays out, but yeah, he is definitely one worth watching. And yeah, you're right. So that one kind of flew under the radar, mine at least. Kangaroo Jack says, since Usyk isn't available till next year, Fury versus AJ, it'll probably be the biggest fight in UK boxing history, and it'll be one step closer to Fury being an all-time great. Yeah, certainly. Look, there are only a couple guys who Fury, you get the feeling he needs to fight that he still hasn't fought. Like, I currently think that he's got all-time level talent, but doesn't have a all-time level resume yet. Him fighting Anthony Joshua would be one big step closer to that. I thought that him fighting Dillian White was a significant step towards that. I don't expect Tyson Fury to be fighting like, the Philip Ergoviches and the Zhang Zhelees and so forth. Not that he couldn't beat them, but he's obviously kind of one foot in, 1 foot out at this stage. So, the unfinished business, so to speak, Anthony Joshua, Alexander Usyk. And so Ruiz versus Ortiz. This was kind of interesting in that sometimes you get fights that really have a split public. This wasn't the most exciting fight. I would say it was a very interesting fight in that most people, I think, thought that for Ruiz-Ortiz to have a chance against Andy Ruiz, he was going to have to hurt him badly in the first half of the fight probably, because 43-year-old legs, you can't really trust the durability in the second half, especially the second or the last 1/3 of the fight, like rounds 8 through 12. You really wonder how he was going to not adapt, but persevere through the exhausting rounds and then into the championship rounds, 11 and 12. What I don't think we anticipated was that Ruiz-Ortiz was going to arguably win more rounds than Andy Ruiz. Not that he's not a skilled boxer. He's obviously a very good southpaw. And one of the big things going into this fight that you had to consider was that Andy Ruiz had never fought a southpaw in his professional career. So I did really factor that in. But I thought that once Andy Ruiz got going and was started, basically hitting Ortiz to the side of the head with those short arm hooks, which, Andy Ruiz is one of those rare fighters who could actually make having short arms work to his advantage. I thought that it might be a case of a little bit of feast or famine for Ortiz, where he basically would have to land something mega to tilt things in his favor. I didn't think Ortiz was going to reduce Andy Ruiz's output to the degree that he did. To where, if you take aside the second round where he dropped Ortiz twice, Hot Facts with Robert Reese is in the house. What's going on, Rob? Thank you for coming through. Kangaroo Jack, what's going on? Thank you. Thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. Take that second round aside with the two knockdowns, which you could, the second knockdown was more so a byproduct of the first knockdown where Ortiz still didn't have his legs and he was basically trying to hold on to anything. Like if you could have given him a rope, the turnbuckle in the corner to hold on to, Ortiz would have done so just to stay upright. Well, Andy Ruiz kind of took a step back, didn't allow Ortiz to hold him, was throwing punches, and because Ortiz was still badly wobbled from that first knockdown, he fell forward, counted as two knockdowns. But if you take that second round out, and then I think the seventh round where Ruiz scored the other knockdown, you could actually argue that Ruiz-Ortiz won more rounds than Andy Ruiz. And it was interesting, like the boxing scene scorecard, because I was wondering how some of the other experts and websites and boxing media, how they had it scored. I saw that CBS's Brent Brookhouse had it like a very slight win for Andy Ruiz. Basically, I think giving Ruiz, okay, so the two judges that had it 114, 111, that means that they had it 6 rounds to 6, with the difference being the 3 knockdowns. If you had it like 112 to 113, 113, 112, that means that you basically went 7-5. 7 for Ortiz, 5 for Ruiz, but he made up for it with the 3 knockdowns. Now, what I was also seeing was some cards slightly giving the fight, not the amount of rounds won, but the actual final tally, counting the knockdowns, to Ruiz-Ortiz. That one I just can't get with. I get the argument, But it's almost like, Manny Pacquiao versus Juan Manuel Marquez won. Pacquiao dropped Marquez 3 times in the first round. Marquez, from that point on, kind of neutralized Pacquiao, which he did through much of their long rivalry, right? But that one ended up in a draw. And watching Ruiz versus Ortiz, even though I'm watching these rounds thinking, how am I supposed to score that? If Ruiz looks reluctant to let his hands go in a way that we know Ruiz to let his hands go, and he starts kind of boxing a reluctant, almost back foot style fight. I mean, I haven't seen Ruiz fight like this before. And then you've got Ortiz kind of circling and kind of keeping Ruiz at bay. In the moments that Ortiz is not getting badly hurt or dropped, he's keeping Ruiz at bay with his kind of probing jab hand, right? His lead right, because he's a southpaw. And every now and then he would kind of poke a harder jab, but it looked like he was feinting more than he was actually jabbing. And then he would, every now and then, let his left hand go. Now, I thought that his legs are old to the point where if he whiffs on a left hand and misses badly, his body kind of goes into Andy Ruiz, where if you look at the third knockdown, it was after an exchange. And the way I saw that was Ortiz's legs were too kind of, old, tired, fatigued, whatever, for him to be able to get in and then get out responsibly while protecting himself at all times. So here he is overcommitting in a way to where they're locked up. And then I think that Ortiz expected like the ref to break them up, and Andy Ruiz, heads up play on his part, saw the in closeness and he said, wait a second, here we are. And then he just dropped him to the side of the head. I think I was talking with my dad yesterday about this, and my dad said, I don't know if I've ever seen a fighter just do that in a clinch. Well, you see people whacking to each other's side of the head, right? And just kind of whacking to the body while they're in the tie-up. But how often have you seen somebody just in a clinch that looks like, okay, it's kind of your run-of-the-mill clinch. You're waiting for the ref to kind of come in and separate, and then one guy just tags the other guy on the side of the head and actually just drops him. So, again, I think that was more a testament to Luis Ortiz's legs, but I just didn't expect Ruiz to be at bay and to be that reluctant to, and I've said this in the preview and in the post-fight, to pick the lock, basically. I look at Andy Ruiz as patiently somebody who kind of feints, changes levels, patiently comes in, and then looks for those opportunities to get from long distance boxing range to short distance boxing range, where now this is his sandbox, this is his playground. He can let those little quick arms go, right? He didn't seem to find that many of those opportunities. Now, when he would sure as hell make them count, as he would also make it count when he threw that right hand counter, because it was Ortiz in the second round trying to come with the left hand. He just got brilliantly, quickly, drop of a dime timing, caught with the right hand counter by Andy Ruiz. But I cannot say that I expected that type of fight to play out between the two. So it was arguable who was winning the majority of those rounds. So I could have seen it. It's just hard for me to it's hard for me to be convinced that the guy at the end of those 12 rounds who should have gotten their hand raised was Luis Ortiz. That would have been pretty wild, right? Again, it didn't seem like it was totally out of the realm of possibility, but it just doesn't seem like that would have been the appropriate call, even as you're scoring the fight round over round. You would have basically had to give Ortiz almost all of those slow rounds for Ortiz to edge a decision. So I think that the right call was made, and some people still have a problem with how close the scorecards were. I didn't have a huge problem with how close the scorecards were because of how neutralized Andy Ruiz's his usual plan A, how neutralized that seemed to be against Ortiz. So interesting fight. It wasn't a barn burner. It had a few explosive moments, but I would say it was a very interesting fight. We have Sky Fisher in the house. What's going on? QT is in the house. Sup, Swoles. Hey, my man. Hey, Sup, Swoles is about to get my technology on these live chats right, by the way. Coming soon. Coming very soon. Good looking out. We'll chop it up. Absolutely. Let's see. We have Eric Eric Shraj in the house. What's going on? Yeah, I see some interesting commentary, which I am going to try my best to get to ASAP. Yeah, Ruiz was not letting his hands go. The swing rounds were difficult to judge. You're right. Hot facts with Robert Reese, my man. They were difficult to judge. It depends on what you were looking for. Here's the thing. If Ortiz is moving around the ring and he's throwing an occasional jab, but his feints look like they're getting a reaction from Andy Ruiz, and you don't see Ruiz coming in and putting hands on Ruiz or on Ortiz, does that mean Ortiz wins the round? Like, I don't know. I guess in those cases, you might want to actually look at the punch stats, which the official judges don't have access to that data. But yeah, it makes it very difficult to score those rounds. Let's see. So on the undercard, Abner Mares returned to the ring and fought a hard 10 rounds against Miguel Flores. Props to him for returning to the ring after having 2 detached retinas. I mean, that's a tough dude right there, Abner Mares. And yes, we did see him fatiguing big time down the stretch, but he did go the whole 10. And, you know, you could argue that he won the fight. It was a pretty even fight. I think it could have gone to Mares, and it could have been a draw. You could have maybe argued to Miguel Flores. It was a very close fight. And I don't have a problem with the final outcome. And I think that win or lose, just going the distance and having this even of a fight was a win for the man, Abner Mares. You know, like this, I didn't think I'd see him return to the ring. He'd been out of the ring 4 years. Think about that. Let's see. Ron Sizzle 402. What's going on? Thanks again. Ortiz needs to retire. Age is catching up with him. Health is more important. So let's talk about this. Okay, Ortiz and Ruiz, where they would go from here. Look, how do you think Ruiz-Ortiz would do against Dillian Whyte? I actually think he would have a very good chance. I think he's a better boxer, technically, than Dillian Whyte. Sure, Dillian Whyte could hurt Ortiz. It looks like his chin is pretty sus, you know, right now. And but I think that it's more likely, to be honest, that in the... Well, okay, let's see. Dillian Whyte's last win was against a 40-plus-year-old Alexander Povetkin. So maybe his jab and his activity is currently too much for Ruiz-Ortiz. But I think it's just as likely that given the angles, the left-handedness of Ruiz-Ortiz, that he could keep Dillian Whyte, you know, at bay. And Dillian Whyte, like Andy Ruiz, has pretty slow legs. Neither one of them are quick-footed, right? So it's not like you're dealing with an Usyk-style fighter or anybody like that, Michael Hunter. I could see Ruiz-Ortiz still beating Dillian Whyte. And Dillian Whyte, by Ring Magazine, since they pulled Tyson Fury from their standings, they have Dillian Whyte at like number 4 still, right? So if you include Fury, Dillian Whyte is like technically ranked, I think, like number 5 heavyweight. So if Ruiz-Ortiz can possibly, very possibly, beat a Dillian Whyte, I don't know if he needs to retire. I wouldn't mind retirement, obviously, and it's only going to be downhill from here, right? Like, but, okay, how would Ruiz-Ortiz do against Dillian Whyte? How would he do against Joseph Parker? I tend to believe that Joseph Parker would be tougher to handle for Ruiz-Ortiz at this stage than Dillian Whyte. How would Ruiz-Ortiz do against Filip Hrgović? I tend to believe that Hrgović at this stage would beat him. And by the way, if this fight between Ruiz and Ortiz, which I had picked Andy Ruiz to win via late stoppage or mid to late stoppage, like rounds 8 through 10 or something like that. But if this fight happened like 3 years ago, I would have gone Ruiz-Ortiz. I thought that highly of his abilities, but it's just crazy to me that in the career of Ruiz-Ortiz, that you could argue that his best career win was against Bryant Jennings. Think about that for a second. Bryant Jennings, unless you think Charles Martin, former belt holder, so you might say Charles Martin. But if I'm talking about who was the best fighter, like entering the ring that Ruiz-Ortiz beat, I thought Bryant Jennings was a better fighter and had been a better fighter than Charles Martin through Charles Martin's career. Bryant Jennings still might be Ruiz-Ortiz's best win, which is a kind of a travesty given how talented King Kong is, you know, or was, you could say. Let's see. Yeah, I think Ortiz can still give us some great fights. And yeah, you know, he's only going to be more likely, it's true, to get stopped down the road because he obviously doesn't have the same punch absorption that he used to. but he could still put some guys out. And I mean, now it's evident that he could win rounds against very good fighters, you know? So yeah, I wouldn't be mad at retirement, but if he wants to stick around, and Stan Tucker said Ruiz-Ortiz's best win was a loss to Wilder. I can't argue with that, you know? Remember, y'all remember how badly he had Wilder hurt in that first fight, right? When Wilder was like trying to hold on for dear life and barely made it out of the round to where he looked like he was out on his feet a couple times. And then after that round, they go back to their corner. And then after the minute that they have in the corner, the ref pulls Wilder aside, has him look at the fight doctor. The doctor's checking Wilder's eyes, giving Wilder even more time to recover. To me, that was malpractice, officiating wise. That was not cool. But yeah, in that first Wilder versus Ortiz fight, Ortiz had Wilder in all types of trouble. And granted, Ortiz had also been knocked down by Wilder earlier in that fight before he had Wilder hurt. So yeah, that first fight was great between Wilder and Ortiz. And then the second one, totally different fight, a fight that looked like Ortiz was winning just about every round until he got knocked out, right? So yeah, Ortiz, you could argue that the biggest feather in his cap, so to speak, was his performances in losses against Deontay Wilder. But yeah, technically his best official win is probably against Bryant Jennings, which is crazy. Yeah, Ortiz should have had more opportunities, you would think, to fight tough fighters. Here's the problem with that. Well, maybe he should have fought like an Adam Kownacki. And he was, I believe, check me if I'm wrong on this, but he was given the opportunity to fight Anthony Joshua before Anthony Joshua then pivoted and fought Andy Ruiz after Durrell Big Baby Miller was disqualified from the opportunity because he tested positive for PEDs. I believe Ruiz-Ortiz had the opportunity to fight AJ. And so if he voluntarily passed that up, then that's his bad, straight up, you know? I mean, he's not getting any younger, so it's like, if that's not what you're waiting for, what are you waiting for? But granted, I mean, AJ was looking like a very dangerous and deadly fighter at the time. He had just beaten Joseph Parker. He had just stopped Alexander Povetkin. I mean, he was on top until he ran into Ruiz that first time. But yeah, Ortiz, you would have just wanted to see him fight the Alexander Povetkins, the Joseph Parkers, Dillian White, even hell, a Derek Chisora. You just wanted to see him fight more, if not elite, those near elite heavyweights, which we didn't really get. Let's see. So, Isaac Cruz, let's talk about him for just a moment, because he fought Zordito, Eduardo Ramirez, and I thought that Ramirez was going to take Pitbull Isaac Cruz a few rounds. I thought Isaac Cruz was going to have to, take some time to kind of get used to the southpaw stance and the crafty boxing. And, boxer-puncher, I would classify Eduardo Ramirez. It didn't go that way, yo. Like, this was a very vicious performance by Isaac Cruz. I mean, man, like, you've got hard punchers, then you've got hard punches who are also accurate, and that's a big problem, because often, even when you see a guy who's a hard puncher have somebody hurt, and I said this in the post-fight, you see them miss with like more than 50% of their power punches. Isaac Cruz is extremely accurate, and he's intelligent in the way that he deploys those vicious punches, where he saw that he had Zordito hurt after he dropped him. Like, that was a face plant. Like, the commentators on the broadcast said, "Good night, Irene." Like, they thought it was over. And then Eduardo Ramirez somehow made it back to his feet and was allowed to continue. But Isaac Cruz then came back in, and it was so cold the way that he did it. He starts coming in like he's coming in for like a charge, right? And then he'll feint. He'll feint you to get a reaction, and then a millisecond later, he'll throw something nasty, sometimes with the same hand, sometimes with the other hand. But he's setting those power punches up pretty nicely. And so it's not like he's just a slugger. No. He deploys those in a very methodical way. That's why he was able to catch a boxer like Eduardo Ramirez so cleanly. Again, the word that comes to mind looking at that performance is vicious. That was pretty rough. And like, the second knockdown was as devastating as the first one in that case. But here was like the caveat. I thought that Zordito Ramirez was going to give Isaac Cruz Pitbull some rounds. But one thing that I couldn't get over was that Eduardo Ramirez was generally a 126 pounder throughout most of his career. He only had 2 fights, one division above that, 130. So think about that. He's a featherweight, beating pretty good fighters, Isaac Avalar and other guys. And then he goes to 130, fights a pretty good Miguel Mariaga, beats him via decision, and then has one more fight at 130. And then he takes this opportunity to fight Pitbull Cruz at 135. So he had only had 2 fights in the division below this. You mean to tell me that your lightweight debut is going to be against Pitbull, Isaac Cruz? That's just a tough order. Like, that to me, any chance that he would have had because of his sweet science-ish ability and because of his relative punching power, at least he was a pretty hard puncher at 126, not necessarily the case at 135. So there was a little bit of that kind of hidden, mismatch attribute going into this fight that was like, he might do okay for a while against Isaac Cruz, but no, he really probably shouldn't have been there with Pitbull. And we got what we got. But I don't want to take anything away from Isaac Cruz. That he did what he was supposed to do, which always sounds easier said than done, right? But Isaac Cruz is pretty vicious. And, I do see a lot of people calling for Pitbull versus Gervonta Davis. They want to see a rematch between Tank Davis and Isaac Cruz. Now, while I do think Isaac Cruz is a good fighter, and I thought that he fought Tank Davis very close in that first fight, I just can't help but get my mind off of the idea that Gervonta Davis had a bad left hand for much of that fight. Like, if you rewatch that fight, notice Gervonta Davis doesn't even let the left hand go for like over 3 rounds consecutively, to where I'm thinking, damn, I wonder how Tank Davis is going to get out of this one. So I could see the wanting for a rematch between Tank and Isaac Cruz, given what we've seen from Isaac Cruz, both in the fight against Davis and then in his couple of fights since. But I think that it would just go even better for Gervonta Davis if they run it back. So I don't have the same appetite for Tank Davis versus Isaac Cruz 2. Not yet, at least. And plus, obviously, it would require cross-promotion, but there are at least 5 to 7 guys that I'd rather see Tank Davis in there with. I just don't know if the promoters have the ability or the appetite to get it done. Let's see. Raleigh versus Isaac Cruz would be great. Yeah, you're right, TJ. And you know what? I would probably favor Isaac Cruz in that. I think I would. And, when Isaac Cruz was a late replacement for Raleigh Romero to fight Gervonta Davis, which he obviously did eventually fight Raleigh Romero, but it was supposed to be Raleigh Romero, right? Then Raleigh Romero hit his legal issues. Then Isaac Cruz stepped in. I was thinking at the time, like, damn, like this replacement is probably a bigger threat than the original match, than Raleigh Romero. So, yeah, I think that Isaac Cruz versus Raleigh would be interesting. Yeah, you're right. Jojo Diaz, TJ, you're right. Jojo Diaz will be fighting William Zepeda later on this year, so he's going to be tied up for a minute. But yeah, you're right. Hot facts with Robert Reese. Raleigh versus Cruz would be fireworks for as long as it lasts, right? Let's see. And TJ said, I haven't heard anybody ask for that except for Pitbull Cruz. Talking about the Tank Davis versus Pitbull Cruz rematch. I saw one of the frequent guests here, I can't remember who it was, who was saying, and somebody, who often has like quality commentary and ideas, but they wanted the rematch. And I was saying, I get it, but I just think that Gervonta Davis would win more convincingly in a rematch than he did in the first fight. Let's see. Seems like Tank Davis versus Garcia 135 in December is a possibility. Ventru, what's going on? Heck yeah. Thank you for coming through. So I've been hearing about that, but aside from some cryptic social media posts from I believe the fighters, right? Like the promoters haven't indicated that anything's official. Like I don't think Leonard Ellerbe or Floyd Mayweather has, and nobody ever hears anything from Al Heyman. So I think that Gervonta Davis might have tweeted something, or Ryan Garcia might have tweeted something leading us to believe that it might happen. But I just don't. We'll see. I'd be excited as the rest of y'all if it does get announced, but I'm more skeptical than I am optimistic. Bud Spence news. I wish. That would have been a great opportunity on that Ruiz versus Ortiz card, right? If they on that broadcast to announce Spence versus Crawford. I was hoping for it as I was, watching the broadcast. I was saying, oh man, are they going to do it now? Are they going to announce it right before the main event? Like anything? But then I also realized that Errol Spence didn't appear to be in attendance. I didn't see him, nor did Terrence Crawford. So I'm thinking like, damn, everybody's dropping the ball here. And then, by the way, the other fight on that Ruiz-Ortiz undercard, Jose Valenzuela versus late replacement Edwin De Los Santos. If you're Jose Valenzuela's matchmaker, it's almost like, stop doing me favors. Like, thanks, but no thanks. Like, I really think that somebody dropped the ball in the scouting report when they made or offered Edwin De Los Santos a late replacement slot against hot prospect at the time, Jose Valenzuela, who was looking, he fought like 5 times in 2021, won 4 of those 5 fights via knockout. And then he had a good fight against Francisco Vargas. I think he knocked him out earlier this year. So Jose Valenzuela was looking pretty good, pretty scary. But yeah, Edwin De Los Santos looked like his hand speed might be special. And Jezreel Corrales, former belt holder, now, veteran who's still pretty good. But most people thought Jose Valenzuela would beat Jezreel Corrales. I'm sure Jose Valenzuela is wishing that he fought Jezreel Corrales because, again, as soon as that fight started, yes, Edwin De Los Santos did get dropped. But when you saw him start letting his hands go, you knew, like, wait a second, who's the talent here? Usually in some of these fights where it's like hot prospect against, the next guy the next guy that they're trying to make him look good against, you could see the talent gap between the fighters. But in this fight, first of all, Valenzuela never recovered once he was hurt and dropped. But even after the ref did that whole thing where he, said, he basically announced what the ruling was going to be to all 4 sides of the ring and then took a second lap around the ring holding, De Los Santos' hand saying, we're taking a point away, taking a point away, taking a point. Even after all that, Jose Valenzuela still didn't seem like he was okay. And again, southpaw stance of De Los Santos coupled with that hand speed, keep your eye on that guy. I don't know if he could take a punch. He's got 1 loss in his career. But, yeah, I'm going to have my eye on him, and we'll see how Jose Valenzuela recovers from that TKO loss. 3rd round, too, early. Let's see. AJ, so let's talk about that for a moment, because I do want to get back, because we talked about it a little bit in the beginning of the show. But let's talk the possibility of Fury versus AJ. 1, do you guys think that Tyson Fury is being genuine in his offer here? And also, is he really offering 40% of the purse to Anthony Joshua? 2nd, do you think Anthony Joshua wants to fight against Fury? Because I do believe his promoter, Eddie Hearn, would love that Fury versus Joshua showdown. Does Anthony Joshua want that fight? If Fury is serious, and if him and, Team Fury with Frank Warren and such, if they are serious, then it comes down to whether Anthony Joshua truly wants the fight. I hope he wants it. Like, of course, we would want to see Fury versus Anthony Joshua, even though I would have. Fury just doesn't want to wait because Alexander Usyk doesn't want to return to the ring until early 2023. So Karma Serene says, no, his date and Frank's date are totally different. So Tyson Fury's coming with 1 date, it sounds like. Frank Warren's coming with another. Maybe they both want it, but haven't talked to each other about it. I don't know. Upheaval 963 is in the house. What's going on? Thank you for coming through. He said AJ is damaged goods. If the offer is legit, I would take the fight and then retire. It would just be a shame if we never get Deontay Wilder versus Anthony Joshua. I just can't let that one go. But, is AJ damaged goods? I don't think he's damaged goods physically. Mentally, though, time will tell. Time will really tell. He seems like he's kind of a different cat mentally to begin with. And he seems like he does take things to heart in certain ways. And obviously, if you've lost back-to-back fights, and he showed his outpour of emotion after his disappointing loss in the rematch against Usyk. But we'll see how he bounces back mentally. If he does fight Tyson Fury, I think he's got a puncher's chance. It's an uphill climb for AJ against Fury. You know, at no step along the way between their careers, aside from when Tyson Fury was actually retired for those 2-3 years or so that he was out of the ring and gaining weight, that would have been about the only time up until the time he fought Wilder, and once that fight was finished. But I was skeptical on how good Fury was going to be when he returned from that initial retirement before he fought Wilder the first time. But that would have been the only time that I would have picked Anthony Joshua to beat Tyson Fury. Oh, by the way, if you guys haven't, please smash that like button if you could. And thank you, everybody, for joining us once again. This is always a pleasure, and it's a lot of fun talking with you guys, talking a lot of boxing. And like I said, there are a ton of topics that we're covering through. Everything from, Josh Taylor coughing up his third title to now revisiting the idea of Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. But, yeah, coming up, let's talk about, Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall. But actually, let me hold that for just a moment. I want to get to a couple of your guys' comments. Ron Sizzle 402 says AJ's not damaged goods. He is a very amazing heavyweight, but his mental. I will pray for him. Yeah, we'll see how he recovers mentally. Ventru says if Usyk indeed returns for 2023, then sure I'll take Fury. I'll take the Fury AJ fight. Sure, why not, right? It will help Fury's legacy. Again, I think Tyson Fury has all-time level talent and ability, and he's got all-time level performances that we've seen him perform at. He does not yet have all-time level resume, but a fight versus Joshua would help with that. TJ said, do I think Canelo could stop Triple G this time? I think he can, especially if he commits to the body. I'd be interested to see if Triple G can push the pace against Canelo. I actually just dropped the official preview, if you will, Canelo versus Triple G 3. I think I dropped it maybe yesterday morning or something. But I do think he can stop Triple G. But I feel like I'm going to give Triple G the benefit of the doubt, and I won't underestimate the heart of somebody, the pedigree of Triple G. I think that even when things get very difficult, I think that it would just take a lot to stop Triple G. I mean, hell, we haven't even seen him down, let alone stopped, right? And yes, he was getting hurt to the body and up top in his last fight against Ryota Murata. So you wonder if Murata was able to do that to Triple G's body with his scooping left hand to the body and his straight right to the body. You just wonder what a 32-year-old like today, Canelo Alvarez, would do to a 40-year-old Triple G's body. So I do think, and plus Canelo's pissed, right? He just lost to Dimitri Bivol. He just saw everybody drop him, or at least a lot of people drop him from the top of their pound-for-pound list. I think Canelo's looking at that like saying, okay. You know what I'm saying? I think that that's Canelo's energy right now. And I think that there might be hell to pay for that. And unfortunately, Triple G, especially with their rivalry and how Triple G won't let the PEDs thing go, which I don't blame him. If you tested positive, you tested positive, and that's that. So I think Triple G's within his rights to keep on mentioning that as much as he wants to. But again, there might be hell to pay in this trilogy fight. But I do think that Triple G will have the fortitude and will make this fight more competitive than I think a lot of people expect the fight to be. Again, I'll be interested to see if Triple G can push the pace with the jab, especially in the second half of the fight, which I'm more skeptical about. I just don't think he's got the same legs that he did in the first two fights. And that second fight was such a classic. I rewatched that a couple times pretty recently. What a wonderful fight, and a testament to both guys' spirits. But and this is at 168. You're right. So I don't know if that helps or hurts Triple G. I know that it helps Canelo, being that he did what he did at 168, and that seems to be his optimal weight right now. Canelo's looking scary at 168. And, as well as he did against Caleb Plant and Billy Joe Saunders, which to me was a lot more difficult to call round winning wise. I thought I had Billy Joe more competitive in that fight than a lot of people had. But I think that his performance against Callum Smith, where he did not get the stoppage, might have been his most impressive performance at 168. Ventru sees a unanimous decision for Canelo. Karma Serene says Triple G is a D-bag. How long ago was that? I get what you're saying, but it's one of those things where, like, it's like if Miguel Cotto in 2022 brings up the first fight against Antonio Margarito. I think that because at the end of the day, he's the one in there who's having to fight a guy who is allegedly or test verifiably taking something that it's a banned substance. At the very least, it's a banned substance, right? So I can't hold it against the fighter who's got the skin in the game against the guy who's reportedly cheating to want to keep on picking at that wound, keep on picking at that scab. I also get why Canelo would be super annoyed by it. I get that side of it too, but I do think it's well within Triple G's right, if anybody's, to keep on mentioning it. But again, I think that there might be hell to pay. Yeah. Oh, Ventru, he said that hurts as a Puerto Rican. Bring it up. Cotto versus Margarito 1. Yeah, that was Cotto's first career loss. He was the A-side fighter on HBO when that fight went down. That's a really tough fight to watch for anybody who's never seen Cotto versus Margarito 1. That's one of the most brutal fights that I could recall seeing. I felt so bad for Cotto, especially after everything that transpired with Margarito following that. And I do think that it took something off of Cotto's career, even though he remarkably came back and still had many good wins after that first Margarito fight. QT said, I think Triple G won the first fight. I did too. And by the way, next week, okay, so I'm going to do the regular live chat on next Tuesday, but then next week, it's either going to be Wednesday or Thursday. I'll definitely let you guys know, but I'm going to do a special live chat just talking all things Canelo versus Triple G 3. So we're going to do that mid next week as we near the fight date. Let's see. Oh, by the way, okay, so with I'm sorry, not Lee Wood, but Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall taking place this Saturday at the O2 Arena in London. I'll just say this, first of all. I'm glad that so many fight fans are invested in this fight. Like, sometimes I'll look at the comments to videos or look on social media, see what people are saying about certain fights. And sometimes you get people who are more so just kind of like analytically, like looking at the fight. And then you got other fights where they are emotionally involved in rooting for one fighter or the other, or say, oh no, I know it's going to be this way. They're not guessing. They're not like, saying this is my opinion on what might play out. They're like certain. They're like, oh my, this will happen, right? Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall seems to be one of those fights where we're getting that type of, just very emotional opinions about the fight. And I love that about this fight. I think it's obviously going to serve both of them well financially. But, it seems like narrative-wise, the idea is it's either going to be Clarissa Shields via decision or Savannah Marshall via stoppage, TKO, KO, something like that, right? Like, because Clarissa Shields has 2 knockouts out of her 12 wins. Savannah Marshall has 10 knockouts out of her 12 wins. And the one amateur loss, that one of the greatest amateurs ever, right? Clarissa Shields, 2-time gold medalist. Her one amateur loss, granted she was 17 years old, but it was to Savannah Marshall. So this is such a meaningful fight. But I think the one result that's kind of being overlooked, and by the way, I just dropped a Shields versus Marshall preview with the prediction like a couple days ago. But what I think is the possibility that I think is being overlooked here is Savannah Marshall via decision. And so this is taking place in the O2 Arena. You've got a fighter in Clarissa Shields who is a very talented fighter, has got good skills, very good defense, and throws a lot of volume, but doesn't have knockout power. Just envision the reaction to any time Marshall looks like she's backing Clarissa Shields up. I just have a tough time, as I did going into Devin Haney versus George Kambosos, or should I say at the time, George Kambosos versus Devin Haney 1. I had a tough time envisioning Devin Haney winning a fight on the scorecards that looks like a close fight. Now, Devin Haney, to our eyes, most of our eyes, looked like he won like 10 rounds, 9 rounds, 11 rounds, something like that, right? But if you look at the scorecards, it was way closer than that. So that theory ended up holding. If Kambosos versus Haney 1 was, to our eyes, a close fight, George Kambosos would have probably edged the decision there. So I think that the crowd is going to go nuts any single time, you know, Savannah Marshall throws like a sneaky looking right uppercut or starts jabbing her way into, well, not into range. She's got the range control ability, right? She's going to be the one with the reach, with the height, 5'11" to 5'8". But anytime Marshall looks like she is, you know, kind of cornering Shields or lets a couple punches go and Shields, you know, might partially block, might eat 1 out of 3 punches or something, the crowd is going to go wild. I don't see that not somehow playing into the judges' you know, opinions in this fight. So I think that I issued out a poll either today or yesterday, and I was asking you what you guys thought the outcome was going to be. Shields by knockout, Shields via decision, Marshall by knockout, Marshall via decision, or a draw. 5 options, right? Shields via decision was number 1. Marshall via knockout was number 2 in terms of the percentage of how you guys voted there. But in the far back, like 10% or something like that, was Savannah Marshall via decision. I actually think that Marshall via decision is a real possibility here, because I do think that it's going to be a somewhat close fight. And I think that for Shields to win it, that she's got to kind of look like she won the fight at least 8 rounds to 4. If it looks like a 7 rounds to 5 fight, I wouldn't be surprised at like a draw or something like that. But I am kind of factoring that in. But yeah, stylistically, Shields is going to have to be careful on her entry points, because sometimes you'll see her when she starts really letting her punches go, sometimes she'll come very wide with that right hand, because she throws a couple different styles of right hands. She throws a right hand that looks like it's the 3rd punch of a combination. She'll go like 1, 2, 3, 4, where she just starts throwing like long combinations with a lot of punches. And then sometimes she'll load up with the right hand. And unfortunately for her, at least to my eyes, it looks like she misses often with that big scooping right hand, right? She rears back with it. Somebody with the timing and the power of Savannah Marshall could really make you pay for throwing wide shots when you're mid-exchange. So I'm kind of expecting Clarissa Shields to kind of have an Andy Ruiz-like strategy in the way that he fought Ruiz-Ortiz, that is, where she's not, I don't think Shields is going to be as active as we normally see her. I think she's going to be a little bit more deliberate and won't just confidently keep on jumping up into the lion's den, into the fire. I think she's going to have to make the jab a serious issue. And she can't allow Savannah Marshall to counter over the top of her jab either. She's got to be deliberate. She's got to move her head a lot, which, again, she's got very good defense. But again, sometimes when she gets cooking, she just starts fighting like she doesn't respect the opponent's ability to hurt her. But she's experienced enough. She knows better. She knows that she can't fight that way. I'm assuming she knows that she can't fight that way against Savannah Marshall. I think she's going to make that adjustment. But then the catch-22 there is, well, now if you're throwing fewer punches because you don't want to leave yourself at risk continuously, how does that play into the judging of, the rounds? At first, I was more confidently thinking Clarissa Shields via decision, which that was my prediction in the preview video. But I'm starting to think maybe Savannah Marshall via decision is the way to go. Say she scores a knockdown, but not a knockout, and it goes to the scorecards. And Clarissa Shields wins, looks like she wins 7 or 8 rounds. But you've got the knockdown, and then you've got a few swing rounds maybe. I do see, the more I'm thinking about it, Marshall via decision is a real possibility here. Let me get to some of you guys. Yeah, Shields Marshall will be fire. Upheaval 963. QT said, Yeah, I've got Shields via decision, QT. Look, I was kind of back and forth on it going into the preview, the preview that I dropped like a day and a half ago or something. I was kind of on the fence, but I'm edging Clarissa Shields, and it's almost against conventional wisdom. Even though a lot of people will say you go with the boxer over the puncher here, I don't think it's that simple. And given the location, given the fight styles, given one of them has a reputation from being able to knock the other out, right? So if they exchange and say Clarissa Shields lands twice on Marshall and Marshall lands twice on Shields, whether Shields is hurt or not, the idea is going to be if they both in like a period of 20 seconds landed the same amount of punches, you're going to give that usually to Marshall if you think that her punches carry a larger impact. I just think that a lot of these things go into it. So I'm like this close to reversing course on that prediction, really, on Shields via decision, because of how much I could really see Savannah Marshall potentially winning this one via decision. Yeah, you're right, TJ. Shields' resume and experience are far superior, as was, Shane Mosley's when he fought Vernon Forrest, and that's kind of one of the fights in the preview that I likened this one to. Not so much stylistically, just in the sense that Vernon Forrest had beaten Shane Mosley, who at the time they fought professionally, Shane Mosley was coming off like beating Oscar De La Hoya, the Golden Boy, which kind of makes you, it boosted, it always skyrocketed you if you were able to beat Oscar De La Hoya. And Shane Mosley was the first person I saw convincingly beat Oscar De La Hoya, and 3 fights later, after defending his belts and being like, once upon a time, Shane Mosley was a top #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. He then fights Vernon Forrest in like his 4th title defense, and he loses, gets dropped twice. And it was really because Vernon Forrest, even though Shane Mosley had the resume, was more accomplished, Vernon Forrest had Shane Mosley's number. And I just wonder, even if Clarissa Shields was 17 years old, I don't know if Savannah Marshall might have Clarissa Shields' number. Yeah, TJ, that's a good point. I don't think Marshall has done a full 10. I know she's been scheduled for 10, but because she won 10 out of her 12 fights via knockout, you're right. I think when she was going the distance, she was still doing 8 or 6 rounders. So you might be onto something there. And that is actually one of the reasons I was edging Shields via decision, is because say you've got some split rounds, or the first half of the fight is pretty even. I think that it would be Clarissa Shields that maybe starts taking control later on in the fight. Good point, TJ. Yeah, you got something there. But I think there's also a high likelihood that Clarissa Shields could get dropped. Now, what would be pretty crazy is if Shields is able to hurt or even drop Savannah Marshall. That would definitely help her cause, especially if she's able to get an early knockout, because it would signal to the judges that, yeah, Clarissa Shields is cracking in there too. So don't give Savannah Marshall lopsided points, basically, per punch, because you believe her to have the far superior power. So a knockdown for Shields would go a long way. Brandon Jackson said, if I see Shields come out there, guns absolutely blazing from the very first bell, I'll go crazy from the hype. Yeah, that would be pretty crazy. If Clarissa Shields comes in there like she wants to fight more than box, yes, that would be exhilarating. But yeah, that could also backfire. Let's see. And just a quick note on another good fight on that undercard, Michaela Mayer versus Alicia Baumgartner. I'll just give you my very quick take on that one. I'm actually going to go Michaela Mayer via close decision. I know Baumgartner's had the power, and her true coming out party was that knockout over Terry Harper. I simply see Michaela Mayer winning via close but probably unanimous decision. We'll see. Yeah, that's another interesting fight, though. And Baumgartner does carry a ton of power. Has a very unusually high knockout ratio, like Savannah Marshall, actually. But Michaela Mayer, to me, she's still the slightly better round winner And I don't think Baumgartner is just gonna, for lack of a better term, flatline Michaela Mayer in there. So I could see Michaela Mayer winning by a couple of rounds. Let's see. So before we call it, I do want to speak just very briefly on the recent fight announcement. And I know some of y'all might not even be able to stomach the idea of Jake Paul versus Anderson the Spider Silva. But before we go, I just want to speak very quickly about that one. I do think this is Jake Paul's, by far, his most dangerous opponent, even at 47 years old. Anderson Silva is, to me, either the greatest or the second greatest mixed martial artist of all time. He is undoubtedly, to me, the greatest mixed martial art striker of all time, most creative striker. I mean, when he was the middleweight champion for all those years in the UFC, like, he was like a magician in there. Anderson Silva. It was something to truly behold. I forgot who had said it. It was during a montage leading into like Anderson Silva's a fight against, it might have been against like Travis Lutter or Nate Marquardt. This is years ago. And they called it a symphony of violence. That's what Anderson Silva looked like at his best. And yes, now he's 47 years old. But, in this whole celebrity crossover, celebrity boxing fight culture, the most impressive feat that I have seen was Anderson Silva beating Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. in a boxing match. Even as unprepared and as weight missing and as, just being a total non-professional, right, throughout most of his career, much of his career, if not most. But Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was a former middleweight champion. And Anderson Silva beat him by outboxing him. He didn't like catch him with one shot that just ended the show, but, showed like a lack of skill. He actually looked in that fight like he might have been the better boxer between the two. And I was very impressed by that. And that was an 8-rounder. And Silva was 45 years old then. And this is going to be the first time, as would have been the case if Tommy Fury didn't pull out twice, or if, Hasim Rahman didn't sign up for a weight that he knew he couldn't, that he wasn't going to make. This is going to be the first time Jake Paul fights someone his own size, which I think is a big deal. Because even when he was fighting those 2 fights with Tyron Woodley was a 170-pound fighter throughout his MMA career. So I am interested in seeing how Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva is going to play out. I'm going to do a very early thoughts video on that either tomorrow morning or the following morning. Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva, and I'll give you pretty much my earliest thoughts on that fight. But I am pretty excited about that fight being made. I don't know if I could stomach seeing Anderson Silva get beat by Jake Paul, to be honest with you. I don't know if I could handle that. Just because of how respected and how legendary the Spider is. And yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised. And I think that Jake Paul wanted to make a splash. Yeah, you're right. Silva, he switches to an extent. He'll go right hand and he'll go southpaw. The Spider will. But I think that Jake Paul wanted to make a big splash with this fight announcement because of how disappointing that Hasim Rahman Jr. fight falling apart was, and how damaging it looked like it could have been to this whole celebrity fight culture brand, especially Jake Paul's, who, he has already, impressed me beyond expectation. Just beating, Ben Askren, even though Ben Askren was not a striker, just being able to beat a former, Bellator champion, for what it's worth, former One organization champion, Ben Askren. For much of his MMA career. The UFC traded Mighty Mouse Johnson, one of the greatest mixed martial artists himself. They traded Mighty Mouse so they could get Ben Askren. So as much as Ben Askren might have turned into a bit of a punchline, especially because of the way he was knocked out viciously by Jake Paul, Ben Askren, he beat Robbie Lawler, a former champion. You know what I mean? Like, Ben Askren was a serious fighter, but he wasn't a good striker. Never was a good striker. So it wasn't as impressive as knocking out Tyron Woodley as viciously as Jake Paul did, which, can you say that you weren't impressed by that? But again, this will be the first time Jake Paul fights somebody his own size in Anderson the Spider Silva. By the way, we're about to wrap up in a sec, but another fight that when they announced it, I was super excited about. Lee Wood defending his WBA belt against Mauricio Lara. And I was talking about this on the top of the hour. I was pretty upset when Mauricio Lara was passed up for that IBF title shot when they gave it to Josh Warrington to fight Kiko Martinez. Because at that stage of Kiko Martinez's career, even though he had knocked out Kid Galahad, you knew that Kiko Martinez, who we had just saw lose to like Zelfa Barrett, like lost big time to Zelfa Barrett, Kiko's like so past his prime that it almost looked like the IBF kind of gave Josh Warrington the IBF title, making Josh Warrington a 2-time IBF champ. Lee Wood against Mauricio Lara. This is two absolute warriors, vicious fighters. And Lee Wood, to my eyes, was in the fight of the year thus far in 2022 against Michael Conlan. If you slept on that please go back and rewatch that one. That one, to me, was an instant classic. Lee Wood versus Michael Conlan. And you know what? I didn't think Lee Wood was going to beat Can Zhu or Zhu Can for that IBF title in 2020. Or was that 20? That might have been early 2021. That might have been, yeah, that was 2021. But yeah, Lee Wood is just exceeding people's expectations time and time again. I think like he lost to, was it Jazza Dickens that he might have lost to back in the day? Lee Wood is, I never thought his career would have been this accomplished. And now he's about to fight the very dangerous Mauricio Lara, who his last knockout was as scintillating as his knockout of Josh Warrington. So yeah, I can't wait for that one. That takes place on September the 24th. I will be issuing a preview on that one pretty soon. But yeah, before we peace out, I want to get to some of your guys' comments. Brendan Jackson said, "Nah, I'm definitely with Anderson Silva beating up Paul. Just doesn't need to try any unnecessary punishment." So, you know, my earliest gut thoughts on this one is because of how like inactive Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley 2 was before the knockout, that was looking like a terrible fight, right? It was so, it looked like it was 50-50. Like every round looked like a swing round. Nothing explosive was happening. It looked like Jake Paul wasn't even landing repeatedly with the jab, which I thought that Jake Paul's jab was improving. But it didn't look like it was the case in that rematch against Woodley. They were both super cautious. That was until, of course, Jake Paul uncorked that knockout punch. In the uneventful rounds between Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva, I expect Silva to be the better boxer between the two. So I almost think that it might take Jake Paul badly hurting or even stopping Silva for him to win the fight. Like, I'm going to ask you guys, who do you guys think in this 8-rounder is going to be the more viable fighter? The non-boxer, but, you know, practicing his butt off, Jake Paul, or the 47-year-old Anderson Silva? Based on what I saw in Silva versus Chavez Jr., I think Silva might be the more active and the more sweet science fighter in the middle and late rounds of this 8-rounder. So yeah, my earliest thoughts, I'm kind of going Anderson Silva, but via decision, because he might not totally put his foot on the gas and go for the kill. Even though, I mean, if you know something about Silva, you know that sometimes in the biggest moments, he'll do the most vicious things. Like, he's the most creative finisher I've ever seen in the history of the UFC or in mixed martial arts. I mean, from stopping Vitor with the front kick to the head, and granted, he's only going to be able to use hands here, but from that front kick to the face, to before he was in the UFC, he knocked somebody out doing a backhanded elbow downward like that. What else has he done? He was the first person I saw catch somebody's kick and knock them out with the other hand, almost in one motion. He was just here, finish James Irwin up at 205 with something like that. So yeah, I'm very impressed. Jake Paul's got some guts, if nothing else. Like, props to him for taking this fight, because Dana White's basically been daring Jake Paul. He's like, hey, you want to fight? Don't fight my guys. Don't fight Jorge Masvidal. Why don't you call Silva out? Well, now that fight is scheduled, so we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I want to thank you guys once again for coming through. TJ, thank you for coming through. Brendan Jackson, thank you. Ron Sizzle 402, thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. QT, thank you. Ventru, thank you once again. Upheaval 963, thank you for coming through. Heck yeah. Hot Facts with Robert Reese, thanks again. Karma Serene, thank you for coming through. I think I already said Upheaval 963, but if I didn't, yeah, thanks again for coming through. Ryan Hong, thank you for coming through. My bad, I didn't shout you out earlier. But he is going with Marshall, and he said it's not even close. Oh, no. Ryan Hong said Shields, Marshall isn't even close. So he's going with Marshall like 9 rounds to 1, 8 rounds to 2. If Shields pull... I might have froze there for a second, but yeah, Ryan... 9 rounds to 2, or I'm sorry, 9 rounds to 1 or 8 rounds to 2. Yeah, but thank you guys once again. Stan Tucker, aka Dad, thank you for coming through. Heck yeah, it's always a pleasure talking with y'all. Eric Strangs, thank you for coming through. Yeah, but Sky Fisher, thanks again for coming through. Sup Swoles, heck yeah. Again, he's gonna have me on point with this technology. So if not the next live chat, then like 1 or 2 live chats after that, you'll see a much more visibly viable live chat. Sup Swole, my man, family. You know what I mean? Heck yeah. Kangaroo Jack, thank you for coming through. Hey Zeus, thanks again for coming through. But yeah, shout out to y'all, and enjoy the fights this coming weekend. And yeah, I hope to catch you guys next Tuesday. I'm gonna drop an early thoughts video on Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva. I just dropped that Canelo versus Triple G 3. Well as the the Clarissa Shields versus Savannah Marshall preview. So yeah, thank you guys once again for tuning in. Catch you guys soon. Peace.